The war between Afghanistan and Pakistan has crossed all boundaries, and it no longer seems like a temporary flare-up. On Friday night, Pakistan carried out strikes on Taliban government facilities in major cities of Afghanistan, including the capital Kabul. The Minister of Defense of Pakistan called what is happening an open war, adding that the patience of the Pakistani people has run out and they are ready to go all the way. In response to this, Afghan militants opened fire on Pakistan. The most critical thing right now is that the Taliban attacked a nuclear test site in Pakistan, after which reports emerged of hundreds of wounded and killed. But in this episode, I want to raise a very important question. How did it happen that Pakistan went from being a patron of the Taliban to becoming their worst enemy? Let me explain. The thing is, for decades, Pakistan was the closest friend of the Afghan Taliban. It was Islamabad that was at the origins of the Taliban movement in the early 1990s. And it was Pakistan that sheltered the Taliban after the United States invaded that country and started hunting them. But what went wrong, and why are the Taliban now ruthlessly attacking Pakistan, where in fact their relatives still live? That's the question we're going to figure out together. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and leave any comment under this episode. This really helps YouTube's algorithm show this episode to as many viewers as possible. In addition, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. The link is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So first, let me briefly remind you that overnight into Friday, Pakistan carried out strikes on Taliban government targets in major cities of Afghanistan. The Minister of Defense of Pakistan called what was happening an open war, and here is his quote. "Our patience has run out. Now there is open war between us and Afghanistan." By the next morning, the Afghan Air Force struck a nuclear facility in Pakistan and a military base in the Abbottabad area in the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. This was reported by the Afghan TV channel Ariana News, and the channel reports, quote, hundreds of dead and wounded. Well, footage of actual lines of ambulances has appeared online, and I talked in more detail about what's happening between these two countries in a separate episode, where I specifically covered the issue of military actions. So I won't dwell on this for too long here. If you missed the episode, be sure to check it out. Go to my YouTube channel, maybe right now, pause this video, watch the current context of what's happening, and then come back to this video. Let me briefly remind you that, according to Afghan media, the target was a nuclear test site. The channel also reported a strike on the Pakistani military academy located in Kabul. This is the main training center for Pakistan's ground forces. The Afghan Ministry of Defense reported that airstrikes were carried out on a military camp near the city. Faizabad in Islamabad, the army district in Nowshera, the military base in Jamrud, and targets in Abbottabad. These targets in Pakistan were attacked in response to strikes on Kabul, Kandahar, and Paktia carried out the previous day. But for those who know even a little bit about the history of this region, a question arises. How is it even possible that two countries that were once friendly have declared war on each other? The fact is that for decades, Pakistan was the closest friend of the Afghan Taliban. It was actually Islamabad that helped found the Taliban movement in the early 1990s, seeking to secure strategic depth in its confrontation with India. In other words, they nurtured these Taliban. But what went wrong? I should note that tensions have been rising since Pakistan carried out an airstrike. The strike targeted Taliban militants' facilities in Afghanistan this past weekend. In October of last year, dozens of soldiers were killed during border clashes between the two countries. And back then, the fighting was stopped as a result of negotiations mediated by Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. After that, a fragile ceasefire was established. Well, last weekend, Pakistan violated this truce. The escalating conflict stands in stark contrast to the years of support that Islamabad provided to the Taliban. So I'll explain what led to such a division and conflict between not just neighboring countries, but countries and governments that were once very, very close. And as strange as it may sound today, Pakistan welcomed the return of the Taliban to power in Afghanistan in 2021. The then Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, said that the Afghans, quote, broke the shackles of slavery that were supposedly put on them by the Americans. In Pakistan, people were glad that the Americans were leaving Afghanistan and that the Taliban had returned to power. However, Islamabad soon discovered that the Taliban turned out to be much less willing to cooperate than the Pakistani side had expected. According to Islamabad, the leadership of the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan group, let's call them the Pakistani Taliban from now on, and a significant part of its fighters are based in Afghanistan. Also, armed insurgents seeking independence for the southwestern Pakistani province of Balochistan are hiding there. It turned out that supporting militants who behave outrageously towards women and even allow them to be beaten is a bad idea. Since 2022, that is literally less than a year after the Taliban returned to power and grew stronger, the number of armed incidents in Pakistan has sharply increased. And the frequency of attacks by Pakistani Taliban and Baloch insurgents is steadily increasing. Kabul in turn has repeatedly denied allowing militants to use Afghan territory to organize attacks on Pakistan. They say, these are some other Taliban, it's not us. In turn, the Afghan Taliban make accusations against Pakistan, claiming that Pakistan allows Islamic State militants to base themselves there. Islamabad also denies these accusations. Islamabad claims that the ceasefire did not last long because of continued attacks by Taliban militants on Pakistani territory from the Afghan side, and that since then there have been repeated clashes and border closures disrupting trade and movement along the border. It's hard to get through. But this raises the question, what triggered the current new wave of clashes? A day before the strikes carried out last weekend, Pakistani security sources reported that they have irrefutable evidence of militants in Afghanistan being involved in the recent wave of attacks and suicide bombings targeting Pakistani military and police. The sources listed 7 planned or already carried out militant attacks since the end of 2024, which they said were linked to Afghanistan. According to Pakistani security sources, one of last week's attacks in the Bajor area, which killed 11 security personnel and 2 civilians, was carried out by an Afghan citizen. Responsibility for this attack was claimed by the Pakistani Taliban. But at this point, everyone is probably wondering, who exactly are these Pakistani Taliban, and how are they different from the Afghan Taliban? The movement Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan was created in 2007 by several armed groups operating in the northwest of Pakistan. It is widely known as the Pakistani Taliban. Well, instead of saying Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, people just say Pakistani Taliban. The group carried out attacks on markets, mosques, airports, military bases, police stations, and seized territories. By the way, most of these territorial seizures were near the Afghan border, but also deep inside Pakistan, including the Swat Valley. And here, symbolism is also important, because it was this group of Pakistani Taliban that was behind the 2012 attack on Malala Yousafzai, who was still a schoolgirl at the time and who, 2 years later, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. In addition, the Pakistani Taliban fought alongside the Afghan Taliban against US-led forces in Afghanistan and provided shelter to Afghan militants on Pakistani territory. For a long time, Pakistan was actually not opposed to the Afghan Taliban hiding from the Americans on their territory. But in recent years, it is now the Afghan Taliban who are helping the Pakistani militants fight against the authorities in Pakistan. What could happen next? According to many analysts, Pakistan is likely to intensify its military campaign, while Kabul may, of course, respond with attacks on border posts and an increase in cross-border raids targeting security forces. Факту засідки українською і партизанщина. On paper, the military potential of the two sides differs. The Taliban's armed forces number less than 200,000 people. Pakistan, mind you, has 660,000 soldiers in its armed forces and another 300,000 in the police. The Taliban have at least 6 airplanes and 23 helicopters, but their technical condition is unknown. However, the Taliban do not have any fighter jets or a capable air force. At the same time, Pakistan has 16 French Mirage jets as well as Chinese fighter jets. There are about 400 aircraft in total, and don't forget Pakistan also has nuclear weapons. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you found this episode interesting and useful, please support the work of this YouTube channel financially with your donation or by becoming a paid sponsor. Sign up using the links and details in the description of this video or by using the QR code on your screen. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.